presentation, seeing the tenor of this group. But I am Joel Sheldon. I am the majority owner. It's the third generation of family ownership. It's essentially been kind of employee-owned since about 1914, closely held, anywhere between 8 and 15 owners at various periods of time. I'm supposed to talk about reinvention. I wish I really knew the answers to things like that. It's like, what is great leadership? How do you define it? There are a bunch of different ways to lead, and they're really driven by people. They're driven by personalities. So I've got some ideas about it. Probably not, it's probably pretty old school and basic stuff. One of them, for example, is a quote from a very prominent investor who's now deceased, but he was well recognized. And he said, survival is the key to success. And he said, I say again, survival is the key to success. And that, I suppose, depends on how you define success, which is why some of these talks are so difficult. See, we all define success differently, and we should, because success is for yourself. It's how you define it. And so, if I think I've been successful, it's because I define it for myself. And whether we could have been something like Amazon or something like Nordstrom's. My mother's family was from Seattle and went to high school with the Nordstroms, and they started with a little shoe store. And we started with a little bookstore. So what's the difference between Nordstrom's and Vroman's? Well, it's maybe opportunity, lots of different things. But it's really down to, in my view, survival is the key to success. Another one is by a quote that I like, is from Andy Grove, who was president of Intel for many years, and wrote a book, say about 20 years ago. And it was called Only the Paranoid Survive. Only the Paranoid Survive. And I don't think that means you're really paranoid, that you're afraid. I think it means that you're always having to look out and try to find what's happening in your environment. And in some sense, who the competitors are. And look around corners. And everything you do feeds into that interpretation of who your competitors are. For example, you might say that Broman's is in the book business, and we're a bookstore and a retailer, and maybe we're a little extension of publishing. And then you start thinking, and you go, well, what does a book represent? What does a book represent? In my view, it represents education, entertainment, and recreation. So I'm not just competing with Barnes & Noble. I mean, in some sense, I'm not even just competing with Amazon. I'm competing in 3 big arenas: education, recreation, and entertainment. And we survived the advent of the radio. Think about this stuff. Television, essentially the movies. So far, we've gotten through the shopping center craze and discount books, and we're competing in the internet age. And all of those things are tough. But the reality is, we had to compete against all those innovations that took people's attentions from education, recreation, and entertainment. There are a bunch of reasons why I think books still have a place in that. I do want to go through I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as I can. It's a long history, but to me it's an interesting history, and it will show the innovations and the changes we've had to go through. And I do have to say, one of the keys, in my view, about reinvention is the culture, the corporate culture that one either builds or is brought up in. And in my case, I was brought up in a corporate culture that obviously was always looking outward and trying to change things and move a little bit here and there. So I'll get going here with my slides because they help me. One of the deals about Broman's success is that it just got started in the middle of one of the world's greatest population explosions. When Vroman started, there were about 5,000 people here in Pasadena, and maybe 50 to 100,000 in Los Angeles. So in some sense, we're just lucky. Good timing. This is a picture of the first store. Mr. Vroman is in the bowler hat. That blade sign is a watch, a pocket watch. Vroman's was started as a book, stationery, and watch repair store. We've always done other things than books. Always, always, always. And as a matter of fact, there weren't many books in 1900 out on the West Coast. I don't want to go into publishing history, which I could, because I've got maybe 3 or 4 talks. This is the interior of the first store. You don't see a lot of books there. You see glass cases, you see watches. You can't identify that pile in the middle, but that's the books, and they're 25 cents a piece, okay? An exterior of the store, and you see books, stationery, Kodaks, photo supplies, and leather goods all on the front. This is 60 East Colorado, by the way. That's where the first store was in Mr. Vroman's house. Mr. Vroman was a very fine photographer. 2 books published about him. Ansel Adams once told me personally, when he came to the store, that Mr. Vroman was one of his inspirations in photography. And we had, the oral history is, we had the first supply of Kodak cameras in the store in Southern California. And this is an early display in the early 1900s. We keep changing, we keep growing, we remodel. This picture was taken by Mr. Vroman. He did a lot of photography in the Southwest, specifically Native Americans and the Hopis and the Pueblos. This, of course, is I think we all can identify with the guy in the river up to his knees. I mean, Reinvention. I mean, how did they get out of this? Okay, how did they get out of this? We keep moving and growing. We go down to 329 East Colorado in 1920, which is now the Citibank building the Munger Group owns. Again, an interior, you begin to see more books. A new exterior as we move down to 469 East Colorado. This is the Linden Optometry building, if you're familiar with that. Interior of that store, now you see globes. We used to do a tremendous business in maps and globes, okay? We all know that business has gone away for Romans. We had to adapt and reinvent. You begin to see in the back, and I don't have my little spot marker with me, I should. You begin to see greeting cards in the back. We were probably Hallmark's first account in Southern California. Joyce Hall used to write us personally. You begin to see a children's department in the back underneath the balcony. You obviously see more books. You see leather goods. Okay. This is a building in Pasadena. This is actually our current location, 695 East Colorado Boulevard. And they leased this building in 1929. Guess why? Because we were the largest bookstore in Southern California. And the publishing industry is 3,000 miles away. There's no highway system. There aren't a lot of trucks coming out. So it's hard to get books out here. It takes 2-3 months maybe. So smaller bookstores would call Romans and say, can you send over a copy? And so we started a wholesaling business in the basement, okay? We get through a depression and a world war, and after the war, things are going pretty good, and we decide the wholesale business is overflowing our basement, and we need to build a distribution facility. We're the largest wholesaler west of the Mississippi. We built a building which at the time was good size, was 50,000 square feet. I'm amazed at distribution centers at 1 million square feet. I'm just amazed. I think they gotta have maps and color code them. But by the way, all the basics are the same. The basics are absolutely the same. We had our own railroad spur because that was the most efficient way to get goods out. The National Highway System wasn't established until 1954 with Dwight Eisenhower, and we built the building in 47. This is a picture of probably our receiving dock. I worked there for, And then this would be what we would have called our picking area. Warehouses are still organized in these groupings. There's a bulk storage, there's a carton storage, and then there's the individual book level where you got to get one book and get it to one customer. I could talk a lot about Amazon too. I mean, I have watched them grow. I have a lot of interest about them. I think Jeff Bezos is, I have to admit, brilliant in a variety of ways. Okay, marketing. but he does walk the walk. In other words, he doesn't have a fancy office, and he didn't take salary in the early years. He was committed, and he walked the walk. And that's a big deal about leadership, as you might know. Okay, that's an interior shot of, I can't even remember the machines we tried to, improve with, and I wasn't even there then. But that did lead us into computers. The warehousing business led us into computers, and the warehousing business was my dad's part of the company. And they tried to bring a computer in 1957. It was called a Ramac. It didn't work. And they then brought another computer in 1962. We tried to buy, this is a true story, we tried to buy an IBM 360 or 370, which at the time was basically the largest commercial computer you could buy. They couldn't deliver, so we went to Honeywell and got another Honeywell 2200. And the bearded guy is the guy who, I've known a lot of smart people. I mean, not to brag, but you get through college and you get through groups like this and you meet people, and they're I'm not the smartest, but I know a lot of people. This guy was as close to a genius in this field as I think I've ever touched. He programmed us. And in 1962, our warehousing division is fully programmed. And by 1968, our retail division is fully programmed. Fully programmed. Accounting, inventory control, the whole 9 yards. First bookstore in the United States to computerize its inventory. And I'm going to run out of time because I get off the sidetrack. When I came in business, I didn't know anything about computers. I didn't know anything about business. Never thought I was going to work for Vroman's. Brought in, my dad did think maybe I had some potential. I went down to shipping and receiving and spent a year or two there. But that actually was really important because it interacted with the data, the computer data. In those days, we had cards, punch cards, and obviously you got a price ticket, and you got to match the price ticket to every individual book that comes in. And there was no scanning. I mean, you picked up a punch card that had a bunch of tickets behind it, and then there was a way to stack the books that was in inverse order of the invoice, so that the first, never mind. You got the tickets in the books. But you didn't really want to get the wrong ticket in the book. All right. And so it was all about garbage in, garbage out. Typical stuff. And I then became the auditor and the editor of garbage in, garbage out. So then I had to go interact with the input data, and I was auditing the output data. Okay, so I learned a lot about inventory control. And then they wanted me to go sell the system. Okay? Dale Acuna might really enjoy this. Dale and I are old friends. They want me to go sell the system. So I'm a kid, I don't know anything. They choose the wrong guy, bluntly, and they didn't make commitments enough. They didn't give it enough money, and by the way, they didn't have a lot of money. That was why they got in computers, was to make things more efficient, reduce expenses, put a little more to the bottom line. So, they pushed me out there, and I talked to a couple people, and they all looked at me like I'm crazy. Honest. Nobody knew anything about computers, anything. And so I finally come back, and I've been the garbage in, garbage out guy, right? And I look at my dad and uncle, and I said, look, we can't sell the system. We have a hard enough time keeping the data accurate internally. And these people don't know what I'm talking about, okay? So sometimes maybe I'm the guy who blew it, okay? Because I wasn't the right intermediary selling the capabilities that we had. But there were other factors too. So by 1960, we are the largest retail bookstore west of Mississippi. We're the largest wholesaler west of Mississippi. We're the only school book depository in the state, which is a textbook distribution business. Primarily in the state, West Coast, United States, and we did ship overseas. We're the only computerized book business in the United States. And it winds up, we really have some difficulties. A business story that I have, again, is a very simple, clear business story that we've all heard before. And it's, what business are you in? And I will simply tell you that this computer facility was a business that we did not know we were in. We did it to reduce expenses. And I will also tell you that we had very accurate financial statements. These are guys who split one truck. They allocated a truck between the retail and the wholesale. That level of detail they were looking at. And they never looked at this as a profit and loss center. It was just a reduction of expenses. I forgot to tell you, by 1968, we're producing 1 million tax returns with our computer. We have become a service bureau. We are the large company, so we buy the computer in the marketplace because we need it. Bearded Bert Barber brings in a tax company that he's programming, Tax Corporation of America and Unitex. These were among the first computerized tax preparation companies in the United States. And they use our computer at night, and we use it during the day. We run it, we maintain it, we do everything. And then they want to bring more equipment in, and we say, we don't need more equipment. But if you bring it in, by the way, my uncle's on their board, you know, great relationship. If you bring it in, that will be a partnership contribution. So we're now partners with one of the tax companies. They continue to grow like crazy, as you might imagine. They eventually want to go public. They eventually get bought by the largest processor of MasterCards at the time. And then they go through kind of a venture capital VC growth, and they wind up with a huge company's data processing division. And those guys look at us and say, we don't need your computer. And of course, we'd had a 7-year contract to amortize the cost of the equipment. Everybody kind of with me here, at least? Yeah. And so when they break the contract, we're stuck with all the expenses and no income. What business are you in? We were in the data processing business, and in a sense, didn't see it. By the way, I didn't see it either then. I didn't understand it. We had one line of expense, data processing, $6,000. That's great. We owed $100,000 worth of expenses, and we were getting $94,000 worth of income. So when the income stopped, the expenses went from $6,000 to $100,000. And I'm the new guy in charge. I wasn't, okay. I'm going to stop by. I've got a lot of stories. Okay. Yeah, we're going back to 695 East Colorado Boulevard. We build a warehouse. So now we say we need a new retail store. So this is our current location under construction. Straight back is our Union driveway. I do have to tell you, this was 1954 or so. A very complex little retail deal. I mean, a real estate deal. Very complex little real estate deal. We had to give lifetime estates to the guys in the houses in the back. We bought the houses and let them live in them until, it must have been older people like me and Armando, because we were hoping, never. Okay. Now we build a store. This is Vroman's bookstore, as the biggest bookstore was in Mississippi. Notice, it doesn't say bookstore. Why doesn't it say bookstore? Everybody knew Vroman's. It was like Macy's, honest. It was like Broadway. Everybody knew Vroman's. Upstairs was never to be retail. That was an office furniture division. We sold office furniture at a very effective level, very profitably for 30 or 40 years. That was where we brought all the clients to show them the little stages where you've got this desk and this file, and it's going to look really good, and we're not going to charge you too much. So at that point, we were also probably the largest office supply dealer in the San Gabriel Valley. For the era until big boxes came along, we were actually a very large office supply business. Now, one of the differences here you got to understand about offices, bookstores and office supply, and even stationery. In those days, they were very fragmented industries, and basically very individually owned. In other words, stores weren't real big. When Bullock's came down, if anybody remembers Bullock's, that's now Macy's on South Lake. When they opened in 1947, that was one of the first department stores that ever came out of downtown Los Angeles. And it was like a shopping mall opening in Pasadena at the time. And it sucked in, it was called Bullock's Auto Court, because it sucked in so much traffic from outside Pasadena. And by the way, Pasadena's tax base is still based on bringing in retail sales. we've lost a market share, just like Vroman's has lost market share. But we still have to bring in outside retail sales. People have to come and buy stuff from us to support the city of Pasadena. Okay. Interior of the new store, a lot of books. We're a big bookseller now. We're still in stationery and leather goods. The 70s when I come along, and by the way, I never took a business course, never had an accounting class, never talked to my father or any of my family about coming in the business. I was going to be a football coach, okay? Absolutely true story. I mean, that was what I thought, you know, it was the only career path I saw. Then the Navy came along, and it was during the draft, and so I had to go in the military. I came back, and I had a child, and I had to make a living. And by the way, this is how all the Sheldons got involved. This is absolutely true story. Three generations. My great uncle, my dad was born in Nome, Alaska. These guys have gone up. My grandfather and great uncle gone to Nome, Alaska during the gold rush. That's a whole other story. Great story. They actually make a lot of money up there. They hook on with the guy who makes a lot of money up there. And the great uncle, by 1914, well, the gold is played out, and he's got 3 kids and no job. And he wrote Mr. Vroman, who was his godfather. I mean, this is the history of the Sheldons and blah, blah, blah. He wrote Mr. Vroman in 1914, his godfather, is there an opportunity down there for me in Pasadena? The guy writes back, says, well, come on down for Christmas. This is a retailer's response. You know, I can hire somebody on during Christmas. And that's how Alan Sheldon got involved. And there's a whole other story about how the transition of ownership at that time. Adam Clark Vroman was a very, very, very special man. Okay, my father comes along in a depression, gets out of school in a depression, no job, tries to work mining for a year, and eventually has no job, has a family, needs a job, asks his uncle for a job. My dad comes in the business. I get out of the Navy, I got a family, I've got no job. My dad actually came back and asked me, and we agreed. This was great. We agreed that I would try. I said to him, you've done so much for me. I thought I was great. This is the hubris of youth. I said, you've done so much for me. I can give you as much time as I gave the Navy, which was 3 years. And so I kind of signed on for 3 years. So I thought this was brilliant on my part. I know, now that I've been there 49 years, if you count the whole slew, I realized it was brilliant on his part. Because if it wasn't going to work out, there was an end that we were both going to have to look at each other and say, you've been great, you're wonderful, but guess what? This doesn't suit you. And this has happened in our family, believe me. In my generation, there would be 35 owners of Romans, just family. And so you have some people, it's not for them. By the way, my children are not going to run the business. Another story. Okay, I don't know where I'm going with this now. This is where we are today. And how did we get here? And did I blow it? Okay. You reinvent yourself by passion, hard work. And passion is an I'm going to use a bunch of cliches because in some sense they're true. But you have to internalize them. You have to live them. And it's very hard living them. It's very hard living them. I'm sure many people in this room know. With startups and high-tech stuff, and you don't get the financing, and you just sick to your stomach, and maybe there's another phone call you can make, or another guy you can meet, or a woman you can meet, and I have a financing story. In 1982, interest rates are 20%. I have thrown out, I've had to close our warehousing division. I threw out every piece of data processing equipment we had. Believe me, I didn't want to do it. It was the only system I knew. They had established it before I got there. It was the only system I knew. I knew it was great, but we couldn't afford it. We couldn't survive with it. And I didn't have the skills, this is true. I didn't have the skills to reach out, either take risks and bring better people in. Okay? Now, that's not to say I tried to start a tax company on my own with with Bert Barber and one operational guy from one of the tax companies. I mean, I reached out and tried. I mean, there were a bunch of reasons why it probably didn't work. We were just spread too thin. There were family problems. There were financial problems. There were economic problems. We're in businesses we don't know that we're in. You know, we sue our partners. We get sued by boroughs because we're now in boroughs. One of my big decisions was, well, this is old equipment, so we're going to buy new equipment. We'll be more efficient. We're going to expand our retail side. So I bring in real time. This is probably 1980. Most of you don't know boroughs, data processing equipment, but at the time they were the largest supporter of the financial institutions in the United States. They were in the top 3. By the way, I've purchased 4 computer systems in my lifetime. Always from the top one of the top 3. There's only one of them left. Okay. So boroughs was not a good choice. They had problems. They couldn't support us. It's a very long story. I didn't want to throw that data processing out. I was scared to death, but I had to. Survival is the key to success. Where was I going with that one? Passion. Okay, it gets me back to passion. I was scared. I didn't want to fail at Vroman's. I didn't want to be the guy who would walk into a group like this and have to represent that Vroman's failed during my watch, okay? And that was my passion. Now, it takes a lot of hard work, curiosity, creativity. You find help wherever you can find it. You find ideas wherever you can find them. I once had to go back to talk to publishers. Again, I'm in my 30s, and I'd met a couple guys in the Navy who had Harvard business degrees, and I don't know squat. I wind up going down to UCLA's extension course in the basement of a big downtown building taking accounting 1A, because you got debits and credits, and gosh, I got to understand the profit and loss statements anyway. So I stopped in Indianapolis to see this guy, and I brought all this information from Broman's, and we spent all night going over all the numbers and all this stuff. I reached out to anybody who would listen to me that I trusted. Dale and I also talked about integrity and honesty and hard work. You got to make sure that your consultants and your people have integrity. I don't. To me, the key is this commitment and passion and people. You gotta both enlist good people and associate with good people and hire good people. You have to have you have to have a good plan, and there's a whole speech I could give about planning. You have to be persistent. Romans has certainly been persistent. And ultimately you have to have profits. Otherwise, by the way, this gets back to your definition of success. Maybe some in the room are looking to grab the brass ring and resell and get great evaluations before any profits are there. You might be able to accomplish that. And if that's success for you, that's fine. That's great. Then you got to go do something else, and then you got to define what it is you want to do. For me, seeing Vroman's as an ongoing business is the key to success. And if that's one of the definitions, then you got to make a profit, because we know that's how you pay the bills. I think that's about it. I don't know. I've probably gone on too long. Blew my entire presentation. But I would be glad to answer any questions about the book business, retailing, small business, family business. I've done a lot of different stuff inside this little bookstore that you guys think is a community bookstore. Never mind.
Thank you so much. Sheldon, everyone. Amazing story. It sounds like you have so many more. And please do stick around, and we'd love to pick your brain for comments and stories and whatnot. But right now we're going to open up for Q&A. So if you have questions, again, save comments for offline. We'll walk around with the mic and get some more amazing wisdom from this gentleman. All right, hold on.
Hi, Joel. was a great speech. That was a great presentation. Very nice. You started talking about competitors and the changing in your competitive environment. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you did a competitive analysis every time the market started to change a little bit. How did you approach analyzing the trends and current and future competitors, and how did you make a plan to kind of avoid being crushed?
Great question, good question. Interesting. I guess on a personal basis, I did it in a number of ways. Number one, you look at your financial statement. You know, people tell you when they appreciate what you're doing and are willing to pay for it. So the numbers count, and the numbers tell you a lot of stuff. Most people, I'm sure, here in this group know that numbers count, and they tell you a lot. Remember, I've gone through most of my life in a pencil and paper world, okay? And so I used to do, one of my, I didn't go to business school. So I've used techniques that I can't describe. In other words, I know that there's an official name for this, but I once took a piece of paper and I took every decade and I took every major criteria, size, I can't remember the criteria, down the left-hand side, and then I compared Vroman's position in the marketplace with everybody else that I knew in the marketplace by decade, and lined up the changes. For example, up until, and this is one of the business challenges I faced, up until the 70s, on the West Coast, if you wanted to be in the book business, Vroman's was the best job you could get. So our book buyer in 1970 had been with us for 20 years and was 77 years old. All the key jobs had aged at the same time because they were wonderful people and we were the best job they could get. And of course, I can't remember what decade it was, but as you know, all of a sudden people are much more mobile. They don't stay in jobs for 50 years. So I analyzed all those criteria. And at the same time, you're looking at your own personal financial. I read today, Barnes & Noble is up 1.7% for the quarter. Okay, maybe for the year, I can't remember. And that's a good thing, but it also gives me a gauge of where we are with them. Okay, so you're looking out, maybe even in a macro situation. I mean, Macy's is in trouble right now. We know what's happened. There may be a real paradigm shift with the internet up 16%. Retail, brick and mortar probably will be at best break even, maybe down a point or two for the season. So, you know, there's that stuff. Then there's the direct analysis of a competitor, and then there's the direct analysis of what we're doing. And you know, eventually then you get in and brainstorm and you say, what are we doing and what can we do better and what are our big challenges? And then you have to allocate money. I didn't get to one of my other great parts. My great parts. Actually, I am the chairman emeritus. I make no operational decisions for the bookstore today. Zero, none. Can't tell you who is speaking tomorrow. I mean, I look it up on the calendar like everybody else. I can't tell you what the best-selling book was over Christmas. I don't do anything. We have a great president and CEO about the age of most of you people, and she is better than I ever was, and she is terrific, and she's got great breadth. But then you sit down and plan, and where were we weak, where were we strong? SWOT analysis is a good thing. I mean, it's not brain surgery. I hope I answered the question a little bit.
Not here.
Hi, what are you guys doing in the EPUB market?
In the
E-publications, online books?
Well, we're not publishing anything.
Yeah, but are you selling?
Very little. We're not publishing anything.
Are you able to resell the electronic books?
Sure. Yeah. I think.
Check your sources and get back.
Because you got to electronic books. We sell Kobo e-reader. We reached out to Sony, 5 years ago. No, we're not. Our challenge right now is, well, I should say our challenges. what's my strategy, okay? My strategy to watch my profit and loss and make sure that people are telling me the right thing. As long as people are coming to me, I'm okay. I still believe in high touch. Why are so many people here? You guys are in the tech world. Why are you here today? Because we're social animals. We like it. We like to be with other people. We like to talk to other people. And so I think for a very long time, there's a place for bricks and mortar retail. And so our job, because I'm a pretty simple guy, is to build the best environment we can build. And people will come to us because we're providing something that they want. So we reach out. I did have a conversation with Bill Gross, I heard his name mentioned earlier, and he did say, why don't we compete with Amazon? And I looked at him after my experience in data processing, I looked at him and I said, look, if we go together in this deal, it's one of 20 deals for you. And if 2 of them work, you're a millionaire, and if I'm one of the other 18, I'm not here anymore. Survival is the key to success. Now, did I miss an opportunity? Yeah. Okay. Here's my definition of success. A share of stock in Vroman's today is worth 20 times what it was when I took over. And we went through some very difficult times. I have distributed at least 20 times more money on an annual basis. I distribute to the owners of the company 20 times more. And that's before we stopped the dividend for 4 or 5 years. But if I go back to the 60s, we've been pretty successful. And that's all I can say. Did I blow it? Yeah, maybe, sure. But I also still love to go to my grandkids' soccer game and all that stuff. Definition of success. You all got to make it for yourself.
Over here.
Great listening to you. Thank you very much. You know, one of the surprising things to hear you talk about is those times in your career with the bookstore where it was in dark times. You were struggling. Can you talk a little bit about how you sustain your fortitude? You know, because that's a really big thing.
Absolutely, just talk to my wife. I will simply tell you, there have been 2 times in my 49-year career that I thought we were going under. Well, one time for real, and the second time was in the 2008 recession when every asset we owned was going down, and we got into real estate, we separated out the company, so we're fairly diverse. We have an investment portfolio now. So I think that this is all back to planning and asset allocation. And did I get to my time, people, and money thing? Those are the 3 most important asset allocations we make. Time, people, and money. How did I sustain myself? First of all, a couple keys. I went to groups like this. I mean, it wasn't exactly this, but it was part of my community nonprofit work. I did it for a couple of reasons. I could represent Bromans, I could sell Bromans, I could support the group, and if family was involved, that was what I called a triple dip. I coached soccer, that was a triple dip. Okay. And that got me out. And seeing other people have problems too. And some of them were worse than mine. They're more screwed up than we are. Wow, maybe it's not so bad. I'm a big exerciser. I always have been. Ran many years with Armando Gonzalez. He was had much more endurance than I did. I sucked. I played a lot of racquetball, did a lot of stuff like that. I did start meditating in, maybe the 70s. Went to Kundalini Yoga at the YMCA because this was billed as a stress reliever. Knew nothing about it. I thought chanting, they chanted in this group. First time I chanted, I went, jeez. I don't know, by the way, by the end of the session, I'm ready to come back, chant some more. And I sustained that. This is not going to be a fun one, okay? I drank too much, you know? I needed stress relief. I don't, obviously, I don't propose that, but these are realities. I do think I'm a pragmatist, actually. I've taken the personality things when you're working with a team, and I brought people in, and we got the right people in the right place, and are we communicating? Well, guess what? My top one was I'm a traditionalist, actually. That's even better. And I'm a pragmatist. So yeah, you gotta find outlets. Yeah.
Besides books, what are the most profitable pieces of your business right now?
Books are not the most profitable. And that's why people look at me and they say, "Oh, you brought in a lot of new extra merchandise. You've really changed the mix, the product mix." I look at them and I say, "You're crazy." When I started at Vroman's, in the same retail store, we sold 60% books, 20% commercial stationery, say Staples, and 20% social stationery, say a Hallmark store. Okay? Very different businesses then, but that's what you guys would identify with. 60-40. We're now at 70-30. We got as high as 80-20. I tried, these are other true stories, I tried to change the nature of the business in about the 80s. There was more profit in this other stuff. Well, guess what? I couldn't. We had 100 employees, 60 or 80 of them are dedicated to books. They're great people. I couldn't make the change. I couldn't force it on them. Another thing. I could have. There are autocratic bosses in the world, and they say, that space is going to now go to stationery. Okay? Those are huge risks. When you take a risk, there's a tipping point. You probably all know this. Old Pasadena, I love this example. An overnight success in 1990 or something. Armando and Larry Morrison were very involved in the development, the beginning of Old Pasadena. Overnight success. Vroman's contributed $5,000 with 9 other companies through the Chamber of Commerce in 1957 to match a city grant to do the first economic study of Old Pasadena. It was not an overnight success in 1990. It took 20 or 30 years of effort and planning and commitment from the city and individuals for Old Pasadena to become an overnight success. So you got to watch the tipping point, and there are tipping points in businesses. It's a risk-reward curve. What's the risk if I dictate this and it doesn't work? What's the risk if I listen to the people and I get feedback and maybe I edge out 5%? I say, well, I'd like to try this, and we try it. Some of my ideas don't work. Okay. So we actually are trying to get back to that product mix 60-40. As I speak, Barnes & Noble is trying to do exactly the same thing. They just announced it maybe a year or two ago. They are bringing in stationery, they are bringing in puzzles, they are bringing in toys, they are bringing in Legos. They know they've got people coming in their store. They're not selling enough books, it's not profitable. Actually, their retail site is probably profitable. Anyway, the non-book side of the business has better margins, and we make more money at it. That's why I think Vroman's is liable to succeed over time. That's our job.
Joel, thanks for this wonderful presentation this morning. I'm going to break the rules and make a comment and ask you a question. I've read in your store twice. I'm an author. Your staff was here to support me when I did the presentation. You have succeeded in an amazing legacy, whether you're still hands-on or not. Your staff loves your customers, and your staff loves authors. And I want to praise you for that in this public forum, and so you go back and tell them, you have an amazing team, and you've done a great, great job inspiring those people. So congratulations. They're truly wonderful. When I walk into that store, I feel like I'm home. I feel like it's my living room. My question is, you talked about resilience, you talked about getting through the hard times. one of the other things a lot of the entrepreneurs here have to face is a counterintuitive decision. When all the people are telling you to do something, and all the data is telling you to do something, and you can't sleep at night because you just know they're wrong and you have to make that bet. Talk about one of those that worked, where you as the leader had to make the counterintuitive decision, stare everybody down and say, I appreciate everybody's point of view, but we're not going that way, we're going this way.
Actually, I don't do that. I really don't do that. I like to lead people where they want to go. And part of that is how you frame questions and associating with like people and all that stuff. I can't think of a moment when, from my viewpoint, I made that decision. But I will tell you, when we expanded the store, it was counterintuitive to me, and I thought it was, we're the biggest bookstore in Pasadena. We've been here for 100 years, or 80 years then. Barnes & Noble opens in Old Pasadena. Borders is moving in on South Lake. We will quadruple the selling space of books within 3 years. Quadruple. And I'm expanding. I did not really want to do that. I didn't think it was really going to work. And then I won't tell you about the construction. At November, we could barely get cash registers up. Our sales went down 20%. I'm going, it's a couple times that's happened. I'm going, will people come back? You know, will people come back? Now, the downside, you always have to, I think you got to look at the downside, and if it's okay, then you move ahead. I'm a pretty conservative guy. I got to say a couple of things. One is about this downside risk, and I think that's a characteristic of successful achievement-oriented people. They're willing to take the downside, and the downside may you lose everything if you're young and go ahead. That's okay, but know the downside risk. Well, we split the real estate off, so the downside was we had a better building. You know, Broman's didn't work. I didn't want to go through that. Believe me, I don't ever want to go through that. But I thought my downside was protected, so we did it. But it was, to me, I want to go, why am I doing this? Other guys had to convince me, actually. That's when I listened to others. And a couple of people, like an Armando or Larry Morrison, wish were here. A guy named Andy Valero, who the Angels know, and another guy named Ken McCormick. They went inside. Andy became our turnaround specialist. That's how I met him, and a very astute financial guy. He's made some bad deals, Angels, I know. Those were the guys who said, Joel, you know, you got to do this. And others. I mean, it's not just those two guys. And one never had any involvement directly with Romans, you know, he's just a friend. So they pushed me instead of the other way around.
And Barnes is gone, and Borders is gone, and you're still there.
If you had told me that 10 years ago, remember I've done all this analysis of industry and characteristics, and we can't keep people anymore, and rents have gone too high, and there's too much competition, and Crown bookstores out there, and if you told me that 10 years ago, I'd say you're nuts. Now, I will simply, I was also on the national board of the Bookselling Association in the 90s, and we had some pretty bright people there, and we got in great discussions about when your asset becomes a liability. Think bank branches, okay? You got this great network, and then the ATM comes in, and I mean, this is, you know, most of you people probably understand that. And so we talked about what if the world got flooded with books, because we actually thought it was being flooded with books and overexpansion, and then everything contracts, and what we think of our inventory as an asset is all of a sudden a liability, because you can't sell it, you can't give it back to the public. So we went through, and this also had to do with the coming changes in tech. We went through a whole analysis of watch out. That's what I mean about looking around corners. Only the paradigm survive. You got to be very careful. Let me quickly give you these 6 characteristics of achievement, which I learned long ago from a newspaper article. By the way, reading is a good thing. And I mean all sources, all that interest you. Absorb as much as you can. But reading will I think it will always be here. Maybe we'll connect, eventually directly somehow. But you can ingest more information by reading than any other way. That's why it's so successful. You're just quicker at it, so you can get more. Okay. An individual is able to transcend their current capability level. That, to me, is the toughest one, because you never know until you move up, and maybe you don't make it. Anybody remember the Peter principle, which was the opposite of that? You've hit your ceiling. Good salesman, not necessarily good sales manager. Actually, might be a good marketing vice president. I mean, just because you don't make it at one level doesn't mean you can't even go beyond that. But they're able to move up. They have the capability to do that. They push themselves out of comfort zones. Sometimes tough. They do things for the art of it. I love it, for the art of it. And I can say that the greed on Wall Street can be done for the art of it, the art of the deal. I don't want to get it with Trump. Okay. But it is the art of the deal. I mean, they do it for the art of it. They don't place blame, they solve problems. Don't place blame, solve problems. Now, if there's a corollary to that. If things aren't working too well and you can cut bait as quickly as you realize that it's not working too well, okay? But you don't have to blame anybody as you either terminate them or move to something else. You just have to recognize that it's time to move on. So you don't place blame, solve problems. You look at the downside, and if that's acceptable, you move on, you make the decision. And I think I'm into 6, which is you have an ability to rehearse in your mind, which I think is fascinating. Did I rehearse this speech in my mind before I came? Oh yeah. When I was an athlete, I used to go to sleep. I don't know what the other athletes were doing. And I knew some very, very good athletes, top of the line athletes. And again, I don't know what they were doing. But before a game, this football coach, we had a mirror at the time, we were a very good football team. And he would get us all, you couldn't talk. You went to the bus and you picked up your equipment. You couldn't talk on the bus. And if you did, he'd kick you off the bus. And I saw it. And then you'd get dressed in your uniform 30 minutes before the game. And he'd say, find a place to lay down and just think. And so you go in an old shower stall and lay down. And I thought about what it would physically be like to engage in my role in that game. Physically. What was it going to feel like? I could visualize it. I don't know what those other guys were doing. I think some of them were visualizing. Some of them were trying to just stay awake. So I just think it's an important personal aspect of success. I actually do. Okay, I've gone way too long, and I appreciate it, and I really appreciate your comment.